Okay, so we're picking up again in Deuteronomy. I just restarted. Deuteronomy 16, verse 5. And again, this is mainly stuff we've been through. So let's start looking at verse 5 through 7. And I'm going to start with you, Mel.
Okay. You may not offer the Passover sacrifice within any of your towns that the Lord your God is giving you, but at the place that the Lord your God will choose to make his name dwell in it. There you shall offer the Passover sacrifice in the evening at sunset, at the time you came out of Egypt. And you shall cook it and eat it at the place that the Lord your God will choose. And in the morning you shall turn and go to your tents.
Through 8. Sorry.
Through 8. For 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there shall be a solemn assembly to the Lord your God. You shall do no work on it.
Okay, most of this we've heard before with one big difference. Can you tell what the big difference is? It's where they're going to eat it. Up till now, they've had Passover at their homes or at their tents. From the time that tabernacle set up, they are going to go have Passover at the tabernacle. No more home Passovers. And the only reason practicing Jews have Passover at home now, they don't have a temple. If there were a temple, they'd have to go to the temple to have Passover. Now, verse 7, it talks about after you have the Passover, go to your tent. And most commentators feel that means go to the tent that you've pitched because you've all come to wherever the tabernacle is. Eventually, it will be they'll be going to Jerusalem every year, but in the beginning it'll be Shiloh and some other places. But they're going to have to travel there. So, what do you do when you travel somewhere? They're going to pitch their tents. So they think that's what they're talking about. Go back to your tent. It wouldn't make sense for it to mean go back home because they had to stay there 7 days. Because after the Passover, then they have the Feast of Weeks. Comes right after that, on the tail.
And they were to stay there at the temple all night, or tabernacle. Mm-hmm. And in the morning you should return.
Yeah. The Passover was an all-night thing. The first Passover was an all-night thing. So future Passovers would be all night. Waiting for God to say, get up and go. Okay, let's look at verse 9 and 10.
You shall count 7 weeks for yourself. Begin to count the 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the grain. Then you shall keep the Feast of Weeks to the Lord your God with the tribute of a freewill offering from your hand, which you shall give as the Lord your God blesses you.
Okay, so another name for this becomes Pentecost, the Feast of Weeks. It's a feast associated with the joy of the harvest. So it's one of those happy feasts. They only have one really sad feast, but this is a really happy one because you're remembering what God did for you. And of course, it involved giving thanks to God for what he gave you. And everything else about it we've read in several places. Now let's look at verses 11 and 12.
Rejoice before Yahweh your God in the place where he chooses to have the name dwell. You, your son and daughter, your male and female slave, the Levite within your gates, as well as the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow among you. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt. Carefully follow these statutes.
Okay, so one of the differences with this festival is, yes, they gave to the Lord, but they didn't sacrifice things. One of the few festivals where they weren't sacrificing. And they're ordered to rejoice. And the Hebrew word for rejoice is sema. It usually means like a spontaneous burst of excitement or extreme happiness, what we would think of as joy. And it's expressed in some visible way. You know, can people usually tell when you're full of joy? So same kind of thing. It's not talking about the kind of joy we feel in the Lord, which is an ever-present joy that sometimes we don't let people see, but it's there. This is talking about a spontaneous joy, a joy because of the harvest. It's the kind of joy that David expressed when he was leading the ark into Jerusalem, where he was dancing and gleeful. It's that kind of joy. It's that joy that made him dance and sing. And that's the kind of joy God wanted them to have at this feast, dancing and singing. Verse 13 through 15.
You are to celebrate the festival of booths for 7 days when you have gathered in everything from your threshing floor and winepress. Rejoice during your festival, you, your son and daughter, your male and female slave, as well as the Levite, the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow within your gates.
And 15.
You are to hold a 7-day festival for the Lord your God in the place he chooses, because the Lord your God will bless you and all your produce and all the work of your hands, and you will have abundant joy.
Okay, so this is the Festival of Booths, or the Festival of Feast of Tabernacles, another really great party time where they were celebrating what God brought them through. Typically celebrated in mid-September, early October. Mid-September seems to hit more there more. We saw that back in Leviticus. This feast becomes so important that eventually they just call it the feast. And everybody knows what they're talking about. This is the feast. And something that's so different about the Hebrews compared to all the other cultures. Is there anybody that doesn't make this list of getting to go to this feast? Everybody gets to go. The servants get to go to this feast. That is unusual. No other culture treats their slaves that way. Other slaves have no days off. God knows everybody needs some time off, and they need to celebrate him too.
Too bad we don't follow that rule now.
Yeah. So, those are the feasts that we hear about in this section. We've heard about other feasts. We don't hear about the Feast of Trumpets, the Feast of First Fruits, or the Day of Atonement, the one unhappy feast. We don't hear about those here. We only hear about those three. And these three are the three that they have to go to. Every able-bodied man has to go to wherever the tabernacle is for that feast. So the whole country. You could take your family, but if you're an able-bodied man, you had to go. It was required, which we will see in verse 16 through 17.
3 times a year all your men must appear before the Lord your God at the place he will choose, at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles. No man should appear before the Lord empty-handed. Each of you must bring a gift in proportion to the way the Lord your God has blessed you.
Okay, so those 3 times you went to the place that God chooses. You'll notice that phrase is used a lot. Rather than saying you'll go to the tabernacle, they didn't even have an idea of a temple yet. If God had said one or the other, then if he said go to the tabernacle, well, then once they built a temple, he'd have to re-give them the rules. But no, he says the place God chooses. And for them, it's going to be the tabernacle. Later, it's going to be the temple. So no excuses. And why only men? We don't get an explanation. From what I've read, it's okay for the women to go, but you could leave them behind. You might leave them behind to take care of everything, because women were not considered frail and weak and not able to do things. They ran things at home. Another thing is, if it's the men that are coming to celebrate these feasts, that makes it way different than all their neighbors around, where they were fertility feasts. And for fertility, what do men need? Women. So it's definitely not fertility feasts if you don't bring the women with you. According to Jewish tradition, during these 3 feasts, you could not celebrate a wedding. I mean, sometimes don't we think, oh, it would be cool to get married on Christmas or Valentine's, or nope, not for the Jews. Not on these days. You don't get married. You didn't mix personal and public rejoicings. You had your national days of gladness, and then you had your personal days of gladness. Don't try to mix them up. Now, what if your birthday fell on there? I don't know. Couldn't help that one. Now we see in Luke 24 or 2 verse 41 that Jesus was also obedient to the commandment to go to Jerusalem for these festivals. That's where he and his parents got kind of separated, because they had gone to Jerusalem for one of the festivals, and Jesus stayed behind. So he grew up going down to Jerusalem for those things. Now don't miss the last part of verse 16. God didn't want them to go down there empty-handed. He wanted them to be prepared to give a gift. He still wants us to come prepared to give. There's 2 kinds of people that come to church. Those that want to be served and say, God, feed me. And those that are saying, God, how can I feed others through you? How can I serve? Now, there's times when you're going through something and you need to be fed, and that's what the church is for. But it's about being a family together and helping each other. We're talking about those people that all they do is want to be ministered to. And maybe they need to be ministered to, but they need to grow. And learn to minister to others. They need to be taught. Taught to be the giver, the servant. And the way to do that is by example, being giving and serving. And looking at everybody in this class, that's not a problem. Okay, so now we're going to do what looks like another 180-degree turn. It just seems like those are there. But again, this goes with this chapter. We got a group online. Hi, everybody online. Chris, it's good to hear you're home. So I'm going to make sure I acknowledge people. Okay, so 180-degree turn, but this chapter is about leadership, about doing the right thing. So it's still following in the same general idea. So verses 18 through 20.
You shall appoint judges and officers in all your towns that the Lord your God has given you according to your tribes, and they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. You shall not pervert justice. You shall not show partiality, and you shall not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise, and subverts the cause of the righteous. Justice and only justice you shall follow, that you may live and inherit the land that the Lord your God has given you.
Okay, so we've talked about how judges sit at the city gates. In northern Israel right now, they're excavating the land, the city of Dan. And as you walk around the wall to the opening, there's a seat in the city wall. And that's where judges would sit. And so archaeology, again, showing that the Bible is true. God knows how important these judges are. Their society is going to rely on them for a lot of things. We're going to see them come up over and over and over again. So it's so important that these justices be just, live up to their name, not take bribes, be honest in what they're doing. Bribery is especially detestable to God because it corrupts. It chokes justice, and they can't have that. We still have problems with bribery today, and
Amen.
yeah, and it hurts things. It makes it where you can't seem to trust that you're going to get a just hearing because of things that are going on, and God didn't want any of that to happen. Other cultures, bribery was just normal. We hear cultures today where you're expected to bribe people, and no, God didn't want that. And then this chapter ends with verse 21 and 22, which almost seems like another 180-degree turn, but it's still about righteous leadership. Verse 21 and 22 says, "You shall not plant any tree as an Asherah beside the altar of the Lord your God that you shall make. And you shall not set up a pillar which the Lord your God hates." And just as a note, this kind of carries on into chapter 17, this same theme. Some commentaries feel like this really should be in the next chapter. But it is still about leading. It's about the right way to do sacrifices. And we've talked about this before. The Canaanites associated trees with fertility. Easy to see why. They make more trees. And so they associated trees with Asherah, the fertility goddess. So they would worship these trees and set them up and worship trees. Before, they've already been told, take those things down. Now it's saying, but don't put up a new pillar in the same place. Take them down and destroy them, and there's plenty of spaces. Go find somewhere else. Don't worship them don't mix things up here. So worship God and don't do things he hates. And he hates those trees because they worship him. The trees didn't do anything wrong, but the people did.
He wanted just the altar for them to be consecrated.
Yeah, and he's going to have one altar, not these trees all over the place, or one place to come worship. Okay, now Deuteronomy 17, which, by the way, halfway through Deuteronomy. Yay. Just a couple of weeks, we were a third way. So we're going. Verse 1.
You shall not sacrifice to the Lord your God an ox or a sheep in which is a blemish, any defect whatever, for that is an abomination to the Lord your God.
Okay, so this chapter is really like a law book for the judges. When people bring cases before you, here's the law that you need to go by. So first one is, what do you do with someone that brings an animal that has a blemish to sacrifice to the to God. And Moses doesn't mince any words here. He says God hates that. Now, why would God hate that? I mean, they're bringing something.
But they're not bringing their best like they're supposed to.
Yeah. God doesn't want the cast-offs. He doesn't want the worthless things. Number 2 is not okay for him. God would not accept that kind of sacrifice. Now, it's another area where they're not going to do well in the future. In Malachi 1:8, way in the future, it says, "And when you offer the blind as a sacrifice, is it not evil? And when you offer the lame and sick, is it not evil? Offer it then to your governor. Would he be pleased with you? Would he accept you favorably? Says the Lord of hosts." So, same thing today. We may not be taking a sheep to an altar to sacrifice it, but God doesn't want our second best. He wants our best. And what he's going to do with our best is he's going to take it and he's going to make it better. And if we try to give him the second best, he's going to toss it aside and we get nothing. So we want what God has to give to us, because it can only be good if it's something he makes. Okay, verses 2 through 5.
If there is found among you with any of your gates which the Lord your God gives you, a man or a woman who has been wicked in the sight of the Lord your God in transgressing his covenant, who has gone and served other gods and worshipped them, either the sun or moon or any of the host of heaven, which I have not commanded, and it is told you, and you hear of it, then you shall inquire diligently. And if it is indeed true and certain that such an abomination has been committed in Israel, then you shall bring out to your gates that man or woman who has committed that wicked thing, and shall stone to death that man or woman with stones. Ooh.
Yeah. Yep. You don't want to do that. When it talks about transgressing his covenant, basically means it's to pass over it or to pass through it. Just like stroll through and don't pay any attention to it. Remember when their ancestors made a covenant, especially like Abraham's time, they would cut the animal in half, split it, and walk through the middle of it. So what it's talking about here is, okay, you split the animal, but you're just walking. You're not doing the covenant part. You're not doing your part. And the penalty for not doing your part, you're going to become like that animal. You're going to be dead. Now, notice here, women are included. This time we made the list. Isn't that nice? Is that list you want to be on? It shows that everybody is accountable for their own action. If a woman turned away from God, it was the woman punished, not her husband. I'm sure if her husband were leading her, he would be punished too, but she is responsible for her own action. Can't blame it on anyone else. And it says man or woman 3 times. It's really clear. So when it's talking about the skies, the Assyrians and the Babylonians, they looked at heavenly bodies and they saw gods and goddesses. In the next chapter, we're going to see a lot more of that kind of thing. But they felt that the stars controlled their destiny. We still have people that believe that. What sign were you born under? What stars were out there when you were born? And they were all out there. But what a formation. For an Israelite to do this, that was punishable by death. God hated when people looked to anything but him. And looking to the stars was not looking to him.
But Audrey, but weren't the stars used as a path to guide the people?
God created the stars and everything. He loved the stars. He didn't want you worshiping them. He didn't want you using them for signs for the future. You were to trust God for...
He gave them as a path to guide them, right?
A path to God?
Well, I mean,
it's the North Star. Looking for the North Star.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
North.
Yeah.
Well, the wise men followed the star.
Yeah. There's some great verses in Job that talk about the stars and navigators using the stars. God placed them in a miraculous way for people to be able to use them. But don't worship them. Yeah. Don't use them for us. Don't use them to tell your future. You can use them to tell you which way to go, north, south, east, west. But
yeah, that's what I'm...
Yeah, but not, should I marry this guy or not?
No.
Ask God. He'll tell you. So, God's now warned them about fertility worship, about magic and manipulation through the stars. He's talked about omens and linking gods to the stars. These are all characteristics of the nations around them. The nations around them are doing all that stuff. But if you find someone in your group doing that, you better do an investigation now. Not just take someone's word saying, I saw this woman looking at her horoscope or something. There had to be an investigation. Accusations and secondhand knowledge were not enough. In fact, gossip is a sin to God. God wants us to check out facts and then look. And if it's something that first off, we need to figure out, is this something we really need to be involved in? Sometimes we like to stick our noses in businesses that we don't need to be in. But if we see a brother or sister falling, we do need some involvement. But what level of involvement, you have to really pray. It may be something that, well, the Bible tells us we need to talk to our brother or sister in Christ, but there's a way to do it. So we need to do things in the right way. But we aren't supposed to be telling each other, oh, I saw this person doing this, or we're supposed to check out the facts. In verse 5, when it talks about checking out the facts, it talks about bringing them to the gates. Remember who's sitting at the gates? The judges. So you take them to the authorities. This also brings to mind, and if they are accused and it's found to be true, then they are also taken outside the gate for their execution. Their executions were never done inside the city. Also brings to mind how Jesus was taken outside the city. Then this section closes with a commandment to those that try to commit adultery or who have committed adultery, and if they're guilty, go stone them, which again was not a pleasant way to die at all. Apparently there seemed to be two kind of stonings. There's one where you put a person kind of on a cliff and you roll them down and then you throw a stone down on them. And some people think that's what they were trying to do to Jesus after he preached in his hometown and they were going to throw him down the hill. Maybe that's what they were going to do. And then there's the kind where everybody picks up rocks and throws it at a person. That's the one we're more familiar with. But neither one, not a pleasant way to go. Guys, not quick. Maybe if one of the stones hits your head in the right place, maybe it'll be quick, but usually not.
Did everybody have to participate?
If it was,
That'd be hard.
yeah. But
To live without it?
And that's
Yeah,
when you
back
choose the small stone and aim for its feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
like that.
yeah, it was a community punishment. The community participated. And apparently their community, I mean, it's like we're going, ooh, their community, it was normal.
That's the way it had always been done. So
Yeah.
It wasn't anything new to them.
Hopefully it wasn't a daily occurrence, but they knew it was part of their
Yeah,
responsibility.
They had grown up with it, so.
Yeah,
it was
and we've
really
seen,
ugly to us, but we weren't raised that way.
and then the next verses, in the next verses we'll find out a little bit more about this
Yeah.
in verse 6 and 7. And
The one condemned to die is to be executed on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. No one is to be executed on the testimony of a single witness. The witness's hands are to be the first in putting him to death, and after that, the hands of the people. You must purge the evil from you.
okay, one of our online people, because again, I want to make sure I'm acknowledging them. When we were talking about God not wanting people to worship the stars and stuff, she commented that he always wanted worship of him, not what he's created, which is so true. Okay, so you had to have 2 witnesses, and they had to be independent. They had to be unimpeachable. It had to be taken seriously.
Well, yeah, because they're the first ones to throw the stone. So you had to make sure they were legit.
Yeah. How often do people today judge someone without much evidence?
Too many times.
Yeah.
There's way too many false accusations.
Yeah. I'm sure we've all faced a situation where someone's judged us wrongly. It doesn't feel good. So we need to be careful too. God says, be careful. God is as concerned about the murder of a reputation as he is about a physical murder. In 1 Timothy 5:19, God commands that one should not receive an accusation against an elder except from 2 or 3 witnesses. So even an accusation had to have 2 unimpeachable witnesses. Same as proving a murder. And notice it says 2 or 3 witnesses, not 2 or 3 gossips. They have to be people that have seen whatever happened. Now, stoning was unique to the Hebrews. All the people around them used different methods. They cut off heads, and they burned people, and they impaled them, and it was the government that did this. Whereas, again, stoning is a community event. The person sinned against God and thus against the community, so the community participated. Everyone had to throw stones. And like you've mentioned, the witnesses had to be so sure that they were willing to throw that first stone, which puts a whole different picture on when Jesus tells the crowd with the adulterous woman, he who is without sin among you, throw the first stone. No one was willing to be that witness. He's asking that the official witness step forward. Who's the witness? Who saw this happening?
I think maybe getting the whole community to throw stones too, that will get their attention about their life.
Yeah.
That could be me.
Did the judge step in and choose somebody to throw the first stone?
Whoever was the one that was the witness. If there were 3 or 4 witnesses, 3 or 4 guys threw the first. I guess they'd throw at the same time. Whoever the witnesses were threw the first stone.
Well, it made it to where they had to be sure because they're going to be the ones literally.
Well, another reason they wanted to be really careful is if they were found to have lied, whatever punishment that other guy was supposed to get, they're getting. So, for instance, if they had if the people that had testified against Jesus, if they had been caught in their lie, they would have been crucified. So you got whatever punishment that other person was supposed to have. So you were a lot more careful.
I kind of wish they did that today a little bit more.
Yeah.
Some of that, to some extent. Yeah.
It would make people really think about it.
Just like that young boy that was
Yeah.
beat to death and kicked and all that. That's just so awful.
Well, and
13 to what? 17? 10 of them did it?
And another thing to think about with Jesus and the witnesses against the adulterous woman, if one of them had come forward, would Jesus have said, okay, where's the man that was in this adulterous?
Yeah.
Because if he was a witness, he saw who the man was. But
My grandma had a saying, it takes two to make it, two to break it.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So they were serious about turning away from God. If you turned away from God and if you tried to take someone with you, if they caught you, you were going to die.
Do you think we've become lax in our punishment for the evildoers in this world today?
That is a hard, yeah. That's a hard one because, yeah, we're a whole different society. Personally, I do think we're too lenient, but I also know the Bible says it's going to be like this at the end time. So it's like, okay, it's happening.
God's in control. He's controlling
Yeah.
it all.
Yeah.
He's letting it.
So I think
happen.
I think the issue is trying to make, balancing a trial so that you really are getting the truth and punishing the right person with the right kind of punishment, and wading through the witnesses that are. I think it's become very convoluted.
Yeah, because now they're letting people go because they found out they weren't the ones
Yeah,
who did
years later. Yeah, the DNA stuff.
DNA
Yeah,
can
so,
save a lot of lives.
yeah, so
So
it's hard
somebody
to
lied.
say. Yeah,
But like I said, eyewitness. There could be something happen. 5 people witness it. You're gonna get 5 different stories.
yeah. But our nation does not follow God,
No.
so we aren't going to get the right kind of justice. So, okay, verses. This is a chunk. 8 through 12. Oh, 13. Sorry.
If a case is too difficult for you concerning bloodshed, lawsuits, or assaults, cases disputed at your gates, you must go up to the place the Lord your God chooses. You are to go to the Levitical priest and to the judge who presides at that time. Ask, and they will give you a verdict in the case. You must abide by the verdict they give you at the place the Lord chooses. Be careful to do exactly as they instruct you. You must abide by the instruction they give you and the verdict they announce to you. Do not turn to the right or to the left from the decision they declare to you. The person who acts arrogantly, refusing to listen either to the priest who stands there serving the Lord your God or to the judge must die. You must purge the evil from Israel. Then all the people will hear about it, be afraid, and no longer behave arrogantly.
Okay, so this section is talking about a court of appeals. Well, kinda. This is about a time when they bring a case to the judges that are sitting at the gate, and the judges say, We don't know what to do with this. We have no idea. We need someone wiser to handle this. So they took it to a council of priests. It's really hard to translate into English the words that they use for the kind of cases. In Hebrew, it's the cases are too wonderful. Now, when we think wonderful, that's not the kind of wonderful that we're thinking of. They're just make you wonder so much that they can't figure it out. So they say, we're not going to do that. It's not where they've had a trial and the person disagrees. They haven't even had a trial. They're saying, we can't decide this. So it will go to the priests, who are assumed to be wiser because they have a closer relationship with God. He describes 3 kinds of cases that might lead to this kind of wonderful case: murder, unintentional manslaughter, civil or criminal disputes, or physical assaults. So they brought these cases to the priests, and the priests would argue them. It'd be like having a Supreme Court full of pastors.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. Where if a pastor has a question about what to do, where's he going to go? He's going to go to God. Oh, that's what these priests are expected to do. Go to God. Now, their neighbors did their verdicts by omen. They would look at a sheep's liver and say, he's guilty, or he's innocent.
Or they'd use the knuckle bones.
Yeah, or interpreting dreams, or astrological charts. Wouldn't you love your future to be depending on where's the stars right now? Yeah. So these were meant to be courts that for tougher cases that looked to God for answers, because God was so serious about these being just. So earlier we've seen how they appointed 70 elders in Numbers 11, and they established other judges in Exodus 18. So with those 2 in this, that's where they think they got the idea for the Sanhedrin that was in power when Jesus came, the council that met. Which was a good idea, because there were a lot of priests on that group, and still, they weren't looking to God. But here it says, whatever that priestly court decided, that's it. No more appeals. Their decision had to be respected. Contempt of court was a serious matter. It said, if you don't respect their opinion, you die. Yeah. So, because to reject the decision of this court that had gone to God for their answer was to reject God. So this is why it was stressed over and over and over again that these judges had to be just with no bribes, because they had people's lives in their hands. And don't miss verse 13. God says the people are to learn from this. This is what lets them know what is okay to do, what isn't okay to do. If you do this, you're going to die. If you don't do this, you're going to live. So do this. Don't do that.
Arrogance is running wild in this country.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't learn. I mean, have you seen the news stuff about a letter from Osama bin Laden was up on TikTok, and all these young people, some young people said were like sympathizing with him, with Osama bin Laden. And it's like, what is wrong with you? because we haven't taught our kids. So today we are still to learn from watching what God blesses and watching what he doesn't bless and reading his word. And we're to teach. And that's where a lot of our society fails, is because we haven't been teaching our kids.
Amen.
Okay, verse 14 and 15.
When you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, and have taken possession of it and settled in it, and you say, let us set a king over us, like all the nations around us. Be sure to appoint over you the king the Lord your God chooses. He must be from among your own brothers. Do not place a foreigner over you, one who's not a brother Israelite.
Okay, so this seems like another 180-degree turn, but it's still talking about leadership. But God is looking forward 400 years. They aren't going to ask for this king for 400 years. And they're going to ask for the king because they want to be like everybody else around them. But God already knows they're going to ask for him. He warns them. Choose a person that I choose. Their king had to be different than the kings of the other nations. Other kings had full control over the countries. But Israel's king would have to bow down to God. Other kings could veto laws or make laws, but not Israel's king. The laws were already made by God. Other kings were the final civic authority, but not in Israel. You went to the judges. You went to the priests, not the king, for civil judgments. Now, the people that Moses is talking to right now, their parents had lived under a king, a pharaoh. They forgot what it was like. It wasn't a fun thing at all. They were slaves. Now, is this God saying, okay, it's okay, you have a king? Do you think God's okay with them having a king? He knows they're going to demand it. And again, they demand it because they want to be like the neighbors. And God has been doing everything he can to keep them not like their neighbors, but they're going to become like their neighbors. And the most important thing he says in there is make sure you make the person you choose for king is someone I chose. How was Saul chosen for king? Do any of you remember?
The Lord told Samuel.
The
Lord told Samuel. Well, yeah, because
Samuel chose him, but there's not a lot of evidence he talked to God about.
Wasn't it because he wanted to go or something and the people elected him?
Samuel anointed him.
Yeah, but and you should anoint him to be a prince over my people.
Yeah.
The Lord revealed to Samuel that.
But the people kind of chose him because he was tall. He was good looking. Yeah. He was out working with some animals or something, or bringing animals, and they were saying, hey, look at that guy. He looks pretty good. But when David was chosen by God, when Samuel came and he went through all the brothers and he kept listening to God, and God saying, not that one, not that one, not that one. He was directly telling them who.
Well, here, 1 Samuel 9:15. Now the day before Samuel came, the Lord revealed, the day before Saul came, The Lord revealed to Samuel, tomorrow, about this time I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. So he told him who it would be.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at what all those words mean, because yeah, he didn't fit the mold.
Because he was a Benjamite from the
He was a
lowest
Benjamite. He wasn't,
tribe.
and this Messiah was going to come through
Judah.
Judah, yeah. So, and so if God had, I think I look at it as more of God approved him, maybe not chose him, even though it says, I'm going to bring you a man, and maybe that's some of the God knows is going to happen. But, I mean, there is no question he chose David in the method that he chose. So I'll try to look that up and see why they said that. Okay, let's look at verses 16 and 17. Did you read last, or? Okay.
Yes.
No, I read the last ones. I read 14, 15.
Did you?
Yep.
Okay, so 16 and 17.
Yeah.
Only he must not acquire many horses for himself or cause the people to return to Egypt in order to acquire many horses, since the Lord has said to you, you shall never return that way again. And he shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he acquire for himself excessive silver and gold.
Okay, so several things this new king is not to do. When it's talking about horses, it's talking about military power. God didn't want them to trust in their own military might. He wanted them to rely on him. He didn't want this king to put his personal indulgences at the top by taking a bunch of wives. Typically, I mean, we see these princes and princess stories where they're marrying each other to make a treaty. God didn't want that for this. He didn't want them marrying someone from another nation, because foreign women would bring their cultures. And more than one wife is not the design God had in the first place. This new king is not to rely on their personal wealth. One reason was because wealth was obtained at the expense of the people. That's where they got their wealth from. So each of these is a matter of balance. You had to have some military power, but not too much. You had to have a wife and certain comforts, but not too much. You had to have some personal wealth, but not too much. Keeping a balance can be really hard. So which king seems to have broken all of those? Solomon. Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses with his chariots. He imported horses from Egypt. He had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines. And his wives turned away his heart.
Yeah, I don't think he really thought that through when he decided to just collect them all.
Yeah. Now he would have known all of these laws. He had to read them. But was he deceiving himself? Was he saying, well, I'll stop here. This will be plenty right here. Did he think he could handle all that military and the wives and the concubines and all the wealth? Near the end of his life, in Ecclesiastes 12, he said, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity.
He was supposed to be the wisest man
Yeah.
on earth.
And we have people today that fail in those same things. Maybe not all of them, but one of them or two of them. At times we all do. And that is where I'm going to end. So we're going to pick up at verse 18 next week. More about the king. So We will see you next week. Thank you for joining us.